All right, so we're in a series called For Future Generations, and if you're not aware, let me make you aware, we are also in the middle of a campaign. And when I say the middle, I mean literally in the halfway point of a 2-year campaign, a 24-month campaign that ends in November of next year, where we are in the process of expanding our property, not our land, our building, so that we can create a church that's not only open, but a church that's for the next generation and for future generations to come. And so this series is all about our church and the need for it. In fact, last week, I opened up with this question that I wrestle with often. And really, I wanted to answer the question, is this church needed? Is LifeBridge Church needed in Savannah, Georgia? And probably once a month, I go through just a mental rhythm or routine of asking myself a question. And the question really is this, is if LifeBridge were to close its doors tomorrow, would the church be missed? Would there be people who drive by and like, oh man, like I missed that church. I wish it was still here. Like, would they drive by and be like, oh man, that church helped my family. They cared for us. They served us like no other place. They loved with no strings attached. This is what I long for, but I ask myself the question, and by asking it makes me make sure that, like, hey, are we focused on the mission? Are we going after what we believe God's called us to go after? And so as we progressed through that question, the answer was yes. Like, this church is desperately needed. And it's needed because it's one of the few churches that I believe God has brought together people from different ethnicities, different demographics. I believe God's actually creating a church that resembles heaven, where we might not agree on everything on earth, but we are all focused on Jesus and the mission to know him and love like him. And it's important that we as a church get this right, because we got to understand that it was God's kindness that drew people to repentance. He said, they'll know who you are by the way in which you love one another. We as a church must understand the significance of being able to love people who are different than us. And if we can't do that, let's just go ahead and close the doors now. Like, let's not mess it up anymore than the church has already messed up some of the world. Okay, like, we're broken people, but we need to get this right. We need to love the way in which Jesus loved us. And we ended last week with this prayer that Paul prays over the church and the Christ followers in Rome. He said this, I pray that God, the source of hope, will fill you completely with joy and peace because you trust him. Then you will overflow with confident hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. What God said to Rome thousands of years ago, what he said to the people who followed Jesus, I believe is still just as powerful today that it was then. And in fact, this morning I want to do a little bit of like deconstruction work. I want us to take the words that Paul spoke to the church in Rome and apply it to the church today, specifically LifeBridge Church. If you're here today, I assume, and assuming is dangerous, you know what it does, I won't tell you, but I assume that we all agree. We agree that to know Jesus and love like him is our mission. That our life, your responsibility, is not that you would make others know Jesus. It's that you would know him, that you would follow him, that you would seek him, his kingdom, to look like and live like him, that you would know Jesus, and then you would do your part, not to fix the world, change the world, correct the world, that you would love like Jesus loved. Like this is our mission. And so I assume that we're all on the same page. If I'm not, forgive me. And we schedule a meeting, let's talk. I want to understand. I want to listen and hear your perspective. But with that assumption, I want to fast forward 2,000 years to today. And I want us to just look really quickly before we dive into today's topic of what I believe this looks like, what Paul speaks of, what it looks like today. Because he says that you will be completely full of joy and peace. Like, if you're in the presence of someone with joy and peace, you know it. You sense it. Someone who's not worried about what other people worry about. Someone who's not concerned about how they're perceived or what people think of them. Someone who has this confident hope that today they're being obedient to God and that tomorrow is in his hands. They just live differently. They feel differently. It's attractive. Like it's magnetic. Like, it draws you. Like, there's just something about these people. Like, man, you have a hope. Like, you're not afraid. You don't worry. There's not doubt in you. And you feed off of that. That's how the Christ follower is supposed to be. That people around us would just want to be in our presence. that they would sense this confident hope, this joy and peace that's sourced not from this world, from a God who loved us so much to give his life for us, that it would be sourced through Jesus. What that looks like for us as a church is broken down into 5 values. I believe to be the people that Paul prayed for, we must live by a set of values. And these values are not the only, but they're the most precedent values. The things that if we work on these, if we live by these, our life will look like what Paul prayed for. And the values at LifeBridge are this. We value relationship, the good, the bad, and the messy. Because here's the truth. If your relationship don't have a little bit of messy in it, you don't know that person. Just being honest with you. If there's not a little bit of messy in your relationships, you don't know that person. If you don't bring a little bit of mess to the relationship, they don't know you. You're being secretive. You're hiding. You're trying to present to the world a Jesus that doesn't exist here on this earth. I'm just going to be the best of the best, and I don't make any faults or failures. I'm perfect. No one can ever know that I'm messed up. Like, that's not who Jesus is to this world, because Jesus loves the broken. Jesus uses the least of these to do his greatest work. So for us as a church, we believe that valuing relationship is of utmost importance, because how did Jesus change the world? Through relationships. One at a time. He invested. He poured into. People followed him, and he changed their life forever. We value relationships, the good, the bad, and the messy. We value walking in freedom. This is something that God, that's what he did for us. Jesus gave his life so that we can be freed for now and through eternity from sin, the things that hold us back, the hurts, the hang-ups, the habits. He could set us free from those. And no longer do those have power over us or define us. That we can actually allow God to use our hurts and our hang-ups and our habits for his glory and our good. This is a big deal, church. Like, when it comes to walking in freedom, what we value, like, this is the heart of your pastor. I never want to be up here and present to you a life that I don't think you could actually obtain. I'll be the first to tell you I'm a big mess up. Like, there's been times in my life where I've just royally screwed it up. I have allowed my flesh or my sin, I've allowed guilt or fear to drive, and it always takes me to a place I never want to go. But this is the beauty of walking in freedom. God forgives. He redeems, he restores, and then he takes those things that I hate, that I despise, that I wish no one knew about, he takes them and he uses them for his glory. He takes my disgusting sin, my past, and he brings his name glory with it, and I experience his goodness. It's so important that we are a church that walks in freedom. We believe we value practice, not perfection. We don't want to portray that we're perfect, that we got it all together. We're the best. We got it all figured out. We know what's going on in the world. And we don't ever make mistakes because we're perfect. No. No, we believe practice, because practice is what makes us better. And our faith is to be practiced. It's something to be worked out, walked out, lived out. It's something that we got to try and fail. And just so everyone's clear, following Jesus is the hardest thing in the world. To love like him, there's people who I'm like, I don't know how you love them, Jesus. I can't do it, But then I remind myself, but he did. And if I want to present to the world a Jesus worth following, then I've got to do my best. I've got to practice loving them. I remember teaching kids to ride bicycles. Like, there's this thing in you, this innate ability as a parent. You expect them to fall, right? So you practice in locations where it's like, if you fall, it's grass. Parents who teach their kids to ride bicycles for the first time by cars or mailboxes, you're just mean, okay? Because you expect them to wobble, You're going to expect them to forget that you pedal backwards to brake, Like, you can do that, right? Or that you can squeeze these things. You're expecting them to hit a bump and lose control and fall off. You expect those things because they're practicing. Faith is the same way. And we have a God who wants this. Practice it, and I'll be there to pick you up. I'll be there to dust your knees off when you fall, to bandage the bump on your forehead for running into that wall. I'm there for you. We value this. And when we live this way, these first three values, when we live this way, Man, those values impact everyone in our surrounding right now. The first three values of relationship, walking in freedom, and practice, not perfection, those have deep impact on everyone around you. Your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, your children, the coaches, your school events. These values impact people right now. And we must live these out, because this is what Paul prayed for, that we be full of joy and peace. And when we have a relationship with Jesus, and when we expect messy, we're able to love people through that. We're able to walk in freedom, not hold on or hoard our story, but give it to God. And in our surrender of our story, there's nothing that has power over us or control over us, because God has it. And then, man, when we practice our faith, people around us get to see us try. Sometimes fail, but get up and try again. Those three values, I believe, are the emphasis of Paul's prayer, because people will see something in you. They'll see a joy and a peace that did not come from the world, but it came from the God that you serve. They'll see this like overflowing, confident hope that I don't know what tomorrow's got, but I know today I'm obedient. I'm trusting God today. I'll worry about tomorrow. It's an experience. People will want to be in your presence. But we have two more values here at this church that I'm going to discuss now, and that will carry us through the rest of our time together. These next two values are equally as important, but they are long-term values. When we do the first three, relationship, walking in freedom, practice, not perfection, that's here and now. The next two values, which are super important, are what we do and believe as a church for the generation to come. And those two values are this: we value the next generation. We value generosity. When we value the next generation, when we value generosity, what we are doing is we are sowing seeds in something that is to come. When we give generously, it doesn't always impact right this second, but it has long-term effect on those who are coming next. And why God calls us to be a generous people and a people who cares about, he actually says that one generation will commend my good works to the next. Because he's a generational God. He sees things not today and tomorrow, but decades and centuries. He has a plan for the future, and to play a part in his plan, we must also think of the generations to come. And so when we give and live generously, and when we focus on the next generation, we create a church that's actually cyclical. That 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, the church continues on. It lives on because we're always telling the next generation of God's good works. If you look at a church that's dying in America, I'm just gonna be honest with you, chances are they've lost focus to the next generation. They've become irrelevant. They no longer have anything to share of God's goodness to the next, and so no one's listening. No one's hearing. And so therefore that church is dying. But a church that stays focused on commending God's good work, of proclaiming what he's done, and then backing it with generosity, to love with no strings attached. This is the church Paul was speaking of. And that's what I think our church needs to be. So today, we're gonna hit a topic that I don't hit often. And if you're like the first timer here today, whew, I love you. We're talking about generosity, and we're talking about money. And I mean, you can exit now if you want, but I urge you to hang tight. When I talk about money, I want you to know this is not coming from I'm going to call you this week and check up on you. I'm not going to go look at and see any of our, like, hey, this is what's happening and who's doing what. It has no part of me. In fact, today, what I'm teaching is to myself first. Like, what I'm actually going to read to you today is all about me, okay? I mean, it's my life. It's for Jamie and I, for us to practice what we preach. For me to go home and work out what I'm talking through. In fact, I've had the privilege of, I know what I'm talking about, so I've been able to get a little ahead of you guys and plan, okay? But this is between you and God just as much as it's between me and God. And so as we jump in today, we're going to look at a passage of scripture that comes from 2 Corinthians. Paul is teaching a church that has been blessed by God. They have resources abundant, and he's going to speak to how they should live. But before we get to that, let me just address the elephant in the room. Money creates tension. And in fact, money a lot of times creates pain. It can be really hard to talk about money. When we think of money, it's usually in the sense of, I don't want to talk about money. Because money within itself is a limited resource. If you think about money, like it's the one thing in your life that you can look and be like, oh, it's on empty. Like, it's kind of like fuel, but fuel doesn't stop at zero. Money does. I mean, fuel stops at zero in your car. Like you hit empty, you run out. You can't. You're walking, right? Money goes below zero into the negatives. And then it goes even further in the negatives. And then when you get more money, you got to pay back those negatives. So what you used to have is not as much as you did before. Like money is a depleting source. It could be going away. And money is usually something that we never feel like we have enough of. Like everybody in this world is like, oh yeah, I could probably use a little bit more. I mean, the richest people in the world, just being honest with you, what drives them a lot of times is more. They don't have enough. But even us, if your boss were to come in tomorrow and be like, hey, I have seen how good you're doing. I'm impressed by your work. We're giving you a raise. I don't think any of you would be like, no, you know what? I got enough. Give it to somebody else. I mean, like, just be honest. Like, this is not between, you don't have to tell me anything. Just in your mind. If your boss came in and said, I'm going to give you a 10%, 20%, a 30% raise tomorrow, you'd be like, yes, please. Why? Because you never have enough. You could always use more. None of us would turn down more money. In this whole Christian faith thing, money is usually the hardest to give. Like if God says, I want more of your faith, like, yeah, I can give you some more faith, right? I can give you some more trust, God. I got room for more trust. You want more of my heart? Yeah. My life? Yeah. Because we don't have this tangible meter. We can't like pull up an app and like, all right, I'm only giving God 37% of my heart. I think I can bump it up to 40, right? You don't have that. Like you don't have this thing in your life that says, all right, I'm only giving 80% of trust and he wants a little bit more. God, that's almost 100%. I don't know if I can give you 100%. That's a lot, right? We don't have this meter in us that when God calls for trust or faith, when he calls for us to do more, serve, we don't have it. So it's like, in us, it's like, oh yeah, I'll do that, God. I'll keep giving. I'll give you more of my time. I'll say yes to more things. That's just in us because we're not measuring it. But when money comes, money is something that we tangibly see. And when it's out, it's out. And we do measure it very closely. Did you know that the number one used apps all are attached to money? It's the one app that they believe every American views daily. It's the app that somebody in your family is checking in, looking up, finding out how much do we have? Did that clear? Like is the budget lining up, right? This past year, early this year, we received our first gift of stock. And when I got it, it was like, awesome, it's really cool. It was almost a $20,000 gift of stock. And cool. And they're like, what do you want to do with it? I'm like, well, we're just going to let it sit for just a little bit. My hope is that we can build this fund. Okay, so we're just watching it. And I was literally weeks would go by, months would go by, and I didn't think about it. But then I noticed one day that our stock had gained $2. Whoa, that's pretty cool. $2. You got 500 shares. $2 is you just made $1,000. It's growing. Well, then next week I thought I'd check again. We grew again. We gained $3. Well, now I'm going to start checking a little more often. I'm going to change my little app that shows me all the stocks. S&P 500 and all that. I'm going to move this stock up, so it's the first thing that I see. And now I'm going to check it daily. Ooh, it gained $1 this morning. I'm going to check it again this afternoon. It's amazing how this little stock that we had, as it grew, its hook grew in me. And it drew me in. That stock's gained almost $10 since it was given to us. Wow, this is growing, and now I'm hooked. And I'm watching it. And it has a little bit of control in my life. Because when that stock drops $1, should we sell it? I don't want to lose any more. We gained a whole bunch, and all my advisors are like, hey, slow down there, kiddo. you know? Maybe don't look at it this week. Maybe take a break, a month off, you know? Like, why? Because now I see it. And I see what I had and what I've lost. And I don't want to lose. I want to gain and only gain. And when I lose, I feel like I'm losing everything. And it causes me to make choices and decisions that are irrational and quick and hastily. Why? Because that's what money does. Whenever I have conversations around money, it's usually got some sort of stress involved to it. We're trying to make ends meet. We're trying to figure out this and what's it going to look like with this and how can we float that dollar over a couple paychecks? You know, like how can we make this happen and then get this? And if we paid on a credit card, this, we got paid off. How do we do it? And it's usually, it's like a balancing act. It has stress involved with it. It's always around this idea of stretching it, making it go further, last longer. It's always demanding me to cut something out so that something else can exist, right? And in this whole conversation, a lot of times, it steals my joy. Oh man, it can suck the joy right out of you. I mean, losing $1 on stock, and just so you know, like, I realize that the gifts that are given to this church, they're not mine. It's a resource that we've all given to, and it creates a lot of stress. I want to make sure it's managed well, that we use it wisely, that we do what God's called us to do, and that I don't allow a resource that's growing to be lost. It's like, I get hooked in. And if I'm not careful, losing a little bit causes joy to go with it. Money has a unique way of taking from us, stealing from us, or just moving us in a direction that allows it to become more of a priority than God. It allows us to diminish God's power and increase its power. And more feels like more power. You know, feels like more security, more comfort, right? And all of my conversations with people who are prepping to retire, the question they're asking is, do I have enough? Am I going to be okay? Because the truth is we place a lot of our security in it. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. God is to be our source. He is to be our provision, our provider. And when anything else begins to provide a source for us of joy, that when we have more, we feel better, and we have less, we feel bad, man, we are at the control of something dangerous, and we must make a change. And so Paul speaks to this. In 16 minutes, he teaches us this, okay? I went a little long in the last service, so forgive me. We're in 2 Corinthians 8. Paul is speaking to a church that has been blessed, and he wants them to understand something very important. They can't lose sight of this. In 8 verse 1, he says this. Now I want you to know, dear brothers and sisters, that God and his kindness has done what God and his kindness has done through the church in Macedonia. So Macedonia, though it doesn't have a letter from Paul, like Romans or Ephesians or Corinthians or Galatians, Paul he often visited these three little segment of churches that made up this Macedonian area, okay? These three little communities of churches he would go to visit, and he's heard something about these three churches. He says this about them. They are being tested by many troubles, and they are very poor. I can kind of relate to the beginning of what he's saying. These people, these Christ followers, are experiencing some persecution. And it's both physically, but also emotionally. He says they're poor. They don't have enough of the resource that they long for. I've been watching my escrow account. Every December to January, my mortgage company starts to do that evaluation where they begin to evaluate my property taxes and insurance and flood insurance. And for the last 2 years, they've estimated low, which means I have to make up a loss at the end of the year. And then usually my escrow goes up, which means my mortgage payment goes up, right? And they've miscalculated again. And this is not how dare them, but they miscalculated. And there's a deficit, $200. And I know they're going to tack that onto the escrow going forward. So my mortgage payment is going to go up. And I feel that pinch. I sense it. I know it. It's going to change. It's an automatic draft every first of the month, and it's going to be more than it was. I sense, well, if that's taking more, and my kids are getting older and these cost more, like I feel a financial pressure. These people were feeling that. He's like, listen, they have been tested by many troubles. They've been challenged. Things haven't gone their way. And it says they are very poor, but, and sometimes I hate the word but in the Bible, and then sometimes it's good. And this is one of the rare occasions that but is good, okay? But even though they're troubles, even though they're being tested, they're also filled with abundant joy, which is overflowed in rich generosity. Now here's the tie between last week and this week. Paul said, I pray that God, the source of hope, will fill you completely with joy and peace. You'll be filled completely and that you would overflow with hope. Paul says, these people are filled with abundant joy and it has overflowed. That hope that he spoke of in Romans, he gives a tangible expression of it in Corinthians. That overflow was rich generosity. This overflow was, they gave financially. And he's going to continue and tell us about that. And verse 3 says, for I can testify that they gave not only what they could afford, but far more. And they did it on their own free will. They begged us again and again for the privilege of sharing in the gift for the believers in Jerusalem. They even did more than we had hoped. For their first action was to give themselves to the Lord and to us, just as God wanted them to do. There's these people who have experienced hardships, trials, and they're experiencing poverty. The word that we would say here is they didn't have enough. They could have used some more. Could you relate to that? Have you been to a place in your life where you're like, man, I just need a little bit more? Maybe it's not a lot, but it's more than what you have now. Like that's what these people are experiencing. They don't have enough. They could use some more, but something in their life is different. They recognize their source. Their source is not in what they can do more of to get more. Their source is in a God who gave everything for them. And so recognizing that he is their source, they gave not just what they had, but an abundance of, far more than what they had. Now, there's something intriguing about that to me. Like, as a pastor, as a leader of a church, I long to lead by example. I want to be the person who leads and says, hey, I'm giving far more than I can afford. And by doing that, I'm teaching and showing that I'm living by faith, that my gifts go in abundance of my resource, and that I'm maybe sacrificing some of the things of this world in order that I may give more. But that's really difficult. It's really hard. Like just giving my 10% is really stretching our accounts. And I'm just being honest. So like, if you're like, this is uncomfortable, I'm just being real. I just want you to understand, like, I get this. But these people were experiencing what I experienced, maybe even worse. And Paul says that they gave an abundance of, more than what they had, but more than that. And then he uses these words that are just powerful. Their first action was to give themselves to the Lord. These followers of Jesus, they recognize that everything that they have, and even the things they didn't have, was all in God's hands. That what they longed for and wanted for was in God's hands. And what they had was all in God's hands. So therefore, they lived differently. They gave differently. They weren't worried about not enough. They weren't worried about how's this going to happen. They weren't controlled by it, but I've got to get this, and I've got to do this, and I've got to live like this, and I've got to be seen like this. They didn't care. They simply trusted. God, you're my source. What I need, you provide. Therefore, I give because you had first given to me. So he goes on, he says, I urge Titus, who encouraged your giving in the first place, to return to you and encourage you to finish the ministry of giving. Since you excel in so many ways, and Like I always, when I teach about money, I always throw out this caution tape that it's not just money, but it's also your time and your talent. You've heard those words, time, talent, treasure, the 3 T's? You heard that before? Yeah, maybe? Okay. Paul erases the caution tape. He removes it. Like the thing that kind of helps me feel like I don't want to make anyone mad. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. I don't want you to leave hating me or the church. Paul says these words. He says, you have excelled in so many ways in your faith and your speakers and your knowledge and your enthusiasm and your love. You've excelled in all these ways, and now I want you to excel also in the gracious act of giving. He says it's not just those, it's this too. In fact, this is the thing that he's going to hang on for a minute. He says, I'm not commanding you to do this. I'm not coercing you to do this. I don't want you to feel guilty. Giving from a guilty conscience is not generosity. So here you go. If you ever give because you think God's allowing bad things to happen to you and you want that to stop, that's the wrong reason to give. If you feel like, oh man, this happened, I haven't given recently, maybe if I give, that'll stop. That's not how God works. God is not condemning you. He's not holding it over you. You are missing out on a blessing. You're missing out on an experience of trusting him and him being sufficient for you. And in that sufficiency, it translates to the world that you have peace and joy, not by money or what the world gives, but by a constant source, an overabundant source of a God who loves you more than this world ever could. Don't give out of fear or guilt. Don't give because if I give, then maybe God will give more to me. If I give, maybe God will stop doing this to me. That's not who God is. Paul says these words though. I'm not commanding you to do this, but I am testing how genuine your love is by comparing it with the eagerness of the other churches. He is saying that your generosity is a test of your faith. It's a proof of your faith. Every single one of us in here, including myself, would love to believe, would love to think that our money is not linked to our faith. I would love that my faith and my money don't have to go side by side or hand in hand, but the truth is they do. Money and faith are yoked. They're tied together. And Paul says it. Hey, I'm testing how genuine your love is, how strong your faith is, based upon your ability to be generous. And this is where it's for you. This is where it's for me. God, does my faith in you align with my generosity? Do I trust that if I give this, you'll provide this? God, do I believe that if you've called me to give this and I've got to make changes, I can't continue to do this, I can't buy this, I can't support this, I can't go here. If I believe and trust and I give, I'm trusting you're going to make ends meet. You're going to provide. You're going to give me something that money can't give me. You're going to give me joy. You're going to give me peace. You're going to reveal to me, show me, allow me to experience that you're enough, that you're better than what money can provide. Our faith and our generosity are tied together. So Paul says this, here's my advice. It would be good for you to finish what you started a year ago. I didn't write that, okay? Even though we started our campaign a year ago, even though it's not like Paul lives today, he said, it'd be good for you to finish. We got one more year. It'd be good for you to finish what you started a year ago. Last year, you were the first who wanted to give, and you were the first to begin doing it. Now you should finish what you started. Let the eagerness you showed in the beginning be matched now by your giving today. Give in proportion to what you have. Whatever you give is acceptable if you give it eagerly. As in, hey God, I want you to have this. I want to give in accordance to your will, but also to reveal, I trust you. I have faith that you are stronger, greater, better than what my money can provide me. That your source of hope, your source of strength, your source of joy is better than the comfort or the security that I could get on my own with this money. Because the truth is, if your hope, if your security is in money, when you have enough, you're good. When it's gone, you're not. But God says he has abundance. He isn't never ending. So it'd be wise for us to use him as our source. Give into what you have. In verse 12, it says, whatever you give is acceptable if you give it eagerly. And give according to what you have, not what you don't have. So often people struggle here. And I'm assuming, which is dangerous, okay? I assume that you want to be generous. I want to be. I want to help others. I believe that this church collectively giving is far greater than me individually giving. I want to give to a cause that I believe in. And I want to give to something I can be a part of. I want to give in such a way that I look back 10, 15 years from now, I'm like, God, I see the fruit of what you've done through us. I see how you use generosity to change lives, to reach people who I didn't think were reachable, to love people who felt unlovable, to break down barriers and restore family tension, marriages, to reconcile broken relationships. I want to be a part of all those things. But so often, many of us, because we can't give what we want to give, we don't give it all. Because I can't give as much as I want to, it paralyzes me from giving when I can. And Paul speaks to that. He says, give out a heart that's eager. God, I want you to use me. I want you to use this little that I have. I want you to take it and multiply it. You see, when we give generously to a cause of like a next generation, what we're doing is we're investing in the future. We're pouring in to a people who are to come, to your children and my children and their children. And the reason why this is so important is because I believe that what we stand for, what we believe, what we do here at this church, and it needs to keep happening. To love people with no strings attached, to serve those who feel forgotten or lost, to love people who feel like they're unlovable, to listen and to sit with and to care and to counsel those who are broken and hurting. Those are all important things now. But there are two things that have to happen. And I'll close with those two things. We have to have a church that is open to the next generation. We have to be open. And I mean like open, like doors unlocked open, okay? Not like open for ideas or open for suggestions. No, like physically, tangibly open. Listen to these statistics that I've researched for a few months now. We want to increase our hours of influence. I want more people to hear the life-saving message of Jesus, the gospel, and surrender their life to him. I want more people to want to know Jesus and love like him. Okay? We must increase our hours of influence. 1 hour a week is simply not enough, especially for our kids, especially for like 70% of the building that's behind us. They need to know more about who Jesus is and what he wants for their life. They need to experience opportunities of trusting him. 1 hour is not enough. We want to increase our hours of influence. So the statistics, I just did a quick research. There are 300 churches in Savannah, Georgia. Give or take, I had to count like through pages of numbers. And if you don't have a phone number, then it didn't get counted. So there could be more, but roughly 300 churches in Savannah. Out of those 300 churches, the average square foot of each building that these churches have is 20,000 square feet. Okay? 300 churches in Savannah, average 20,000 square. Some of those churches have mega over 20,000, okay? That's how this average. And some of them are like us. We have like a little over 12,000 square feet, okay? So take all the churches, average them together. There's 20,000 square feet on average per church. Listen to this. This is where it gets kind of crazy. There's roughly 6 million. So if you take that 20,000 square foot times it by the amount of church we have. There's roughly 6 million square feet of church space in Savannah, Georgia. 6 million square feet. And I was like, that sounds like a lot. What is that, right? So I did some research. Thank you, Google. 6 million square feet is roughly 113 football fields. I was like, well, that's a lot, okay? I can't even picture that. That's I know what one feels like, and I've been to a complex that had 4. So if you think of 113, that's a lot. It's really big, right? A little more specific. 6 million square feet is the Pentagon. Just so you know, in the Pentagon, there's an average of 30,000 people a day in this building. That's a lot of people in one spot. 6 million square feet is 137 acres of land. I've got like a quarter of an acre where my house sits. Okay, so I'm trying to think 4, and then times that by 137 of the. That's a lot. Okay, it's a big space. Out of all this space that we have, most of those square feet, most of those acres, they're sitting empty for 5 or 6 days of the week. 6 million square feet of buildings are sitting useless for a majority of the week. I did some more math. In these churches that we have, the average church size is around 300. So 300 churches, 300 people. Each day of the week, if churches gathered, that would be 90,000 people a day influence. And I'm assuming that they teach the gospel of Jesus Christ. Every single day of the week, the amount of square foot that we have in church space, if it was being used, could influence 90,000 people just in Savannah daily. What would it be like if churches started using their resources to be open on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday? So it begs the question, what do we need? What do we got to do to make this place open? And listen, just LifeBridge is open daily, okay? Every night and every morning, this place is used for small groups and stuff, but there's got to be more, okay? It's too many square feet to be sitting empty. And so our vision, our dream is to create a space where families can gather, where parents can bring children for an opportunity to break, a space to play, energy out, to meet with other adults, to allow cultures to collide. The space that you're sitting in right now is drawn to be a state-of-the-art, this room plus some space, a state-of-the-art indoor playground where families can come 7 days a week and allow their kids space to just be kids, run around, play indoors where it's air-conditioned, where when it's 100 degrees outside and the playground across the street will burn your flesh off, nice and cool, right? We dream of this. But it's more than just a space for kids to play. Hear me out. This week, actually a couple weeks ago, I was getting ready to leave my house to come back for Sunday night. Okay, so we have students from 5 to 7 on Sunday evenings. And right now we don't have a student pastor, so I'm the interim right now. And so I'm coming back to the church around 3:30 to be at a meeting at 4. And I get this text hey, could you come hang out and pray with us? Someone had come to the church, just come by and needed someone to pray. It was a Sunday afternoon when none of the staff were here, no employees, nobody was here. The church was not technically open. The doors were locked. God in his goodness had gotten me to leave and get to the church so that we could spend some time praying with this family. You see, here's what I truly believe, that if this place was open 6 days a week, 7 days a week, people who came here and worked here, let their kids play here, had a small group here, had coffee here, met somebody here, that when their world, even if they don't go here, when their world falls apart, when things aren't the way they planned, when what they hoped for didn't turn out what they believed to be, man, I wanted this, but this is what happened, and everything's going awry. I believe that they're going to be hey, that place we've been going to let our kids play? Those people who let us come in for free and just hang out, I think I'm going to try them out. I'm going to go check out those people. And they're going to walk in here on a Sunday morning and meet our guest services team, who by far is the best guest services team in the nation, who love with no strings attached, who care regardless of anything about you. The person's going to walk in the door and they're going to be loved and cared for because they came at a time when the church was open. And it wasn't like you had to listen to this guy talk for 40 minutes, like we just came because it was open. So many people have come up to me in the last 4 years and said, hey, listen, we came to your church because during the midst of COVID, we pulled onto your property on a Saturday and you gave us food for free. You didn't ask for my number. You didn't email me. We just came and you served us. And then you prayed for us. I want to be that kind of church. But we must be open more often. We must use the gift and the resources that God's given us. We must allow this place to be a place where people can gather, regardless of what they believe. Because we know there's going to come a time where they're looking at their life and like, is this it? Is this all it is? And God's going to meet them right there, and I want to be there for that. We must be open. And the second part of our campaign is this. We must give to have this type of influence. We must be a church that generously gives, not only to expand this place, but we must give to create the space and the opportunity for people to come here. We must give generously. I hate it. I mean, I've looked at Monopoly money for the last year and prayed over it that God would turn it real, He has not done it yet. And I start with myself. This is me. I must give generously. I must give sacrificially. I must give more than what's comfortable, but I must put myself in a trust category of God. I'm going to give out of sacrifice. It's going to change the way I live in order that I might trust you and be a part of what you're doing. Generosity also removes selfishness, where I live the mentality of I need more, I want more, I deserve more. Generosity says, God, you can have it. You'll give me what I need. I'm not going to be dependent on money to provide my source of hope and strength and love and joy. You are. And so generosity is actually one of the core characteristics of following Jesus because it keeps us from looking to the world for support, looking to the world for provision. It keeps us focused on Jesus. And so I need us, me first, to give generously. I just want to give you some numbers. To finish out this year, in October, November, December are usually the largest giving months. End of year giving, bonuses, structure, whatever. So going into the end of the year, our church, LifeBridge, we need two things. We need $150,000 given to our general budget. $150,000 given to our general budget allows us to prepare for next year and finish out this year strong. It allows me to hire the next student pastor. It allows us to expand and grow our reach of ministry, to do more things for our community, to care for more families. Just as much as it's the largest giving months, it's also the largest need months. The amount of people asking for rent or utility bill payments, the people asking for food increases tremendously. And it's hard saying no, but we do. We say no because, hey, we prioritize our people first. We prioritize those who attend over those who don't. But when there's extra or an excess, we can meet their needs too. We want to serve our community. $150,000 in our general budget helps us meet those needs. It helps us prepare for next year, helps us hire a staff member. And the second number is this $100,000 given to our campaign for future generations. You might not care to know this, but I'm just going to tell you really quickly. Our campaign has a pledged gift amount of $1 million. So $1 million has been pledged through these kind of cards of people saying, hey, over 24 months, I'll give this much money. I'm pledging to do that. This is what the bank needs for we trust you. They don't care about faith. Not saying they're bad. If you're a banker, I love you. You're amazing. The banks in general, faith is monopoly money to them. So we've had $1 million pledged to be given by the end of next year. We're currently sitting at $400,000 given year to date. $100,000 puts us at the halfway mark, which is what we need to do now, end of the year, to prove to the bank that we are we are heading the direction of reaching the goal that we set out to obtain. And so by the end of December 31st, we need $100,000 given towards the campaign to match the markers that we've set out for ourselves for the bank. And so I'm asking you to pray. Will you pray about your generosity? Will you pray about your faith and how it's tangibly tied to what you believe and how you serve and how you love? And then you do with it what you want. There's information about the campaign at the guest services desk. There's information, if you ever want any information, we do vision gatherings where I'm an open book, but you can approach me anytime. We can talk about finances of the church, where we give, how we give, what's our annual budget, how are we month to month. You can ask questions. We're a nonprofit. It's all available. But I want you to pray about you and what God's calling you to. And then my last thing I'm going to add to this, and I actually said it in the first part of last service, but God is doing something very unique in our presence. Like right now, right here, he's moving. This week, I got a phone call. Now, for 6 years, about every 4 to 6 months, I make a phone call, okay? And this phone call is to the owner of the property beside us. He owns about 6 acres of land. And I call every 4 to 6 months just to make sure, hey, are we doing okay? We cut and keep up with the front. We park in the front of his property. Is everything good? You know, whenever we take more land, I ask for permission. Can I cut back some trees? Can we open up some more space? He's been he charges us nothing to use that space. He's very generous to us. But it's always me calling him. In the first part of this week, he called me. He said, hey, we've decided we're not going to do anything with it. We were going to at one point in time try to do something on the property, but we just can't. Do you want it? Yes, you know. And I have monopoly money. Will you take that, you know? For 6 years, more like 5 years, I have asked him to give it to us. I've asked. We're a nonprofit. Will you give it to us? It's a tax write-off. Will you give it to us? And the answer has been no. And the answer is still no. So don't be like, woohoo. You know, yeah. I'm asking you to pray. Will you pray that God would open the doors for us to walk through and he would close the doors we're supposed to close? That if we're supposed to have this land, that does change the future of this place drastically, that he would make it happen. But if it's not supposed to happen, would he close that door very quickly? Because it steals a lot of thoughts, a lot of minds, a lot of dreams. And I'm a dreamer. I've already dreamed. We're going to build an overpass and another, you know, I've got it planned out, okay? Like, oh God, give me the breaks. Would you join me in praying that God would make it very clear and evident what we're supposed to do as a church? Because here's the truth. God is going to he's already used this place. He's already used you in ways you can't even imagine. Like the phone calls and the people and the homes and the houses and the families that we've served and loved. Literally no expectation of return. What you have done is amazing. But what he's calling us to is greater than we've ever dreamed or imagined. And so I'm asking you to pray. God, how would you want me to participate in this? What do you want from me? And then pray for clarity. God, guide us in the next steps for what the future holds. Thanks for being here this morning. Let me pray for us. Jesus, thank you for the day. Thank you for your words. They are life to us. Your words speak into us, shaping us, forming us into your image. And this morning, God, I call upon your name, and I humbly ask for myself, what are you calling me to? What are you asking me to give? What part am I to play in obedience to your work? God, show me, reveal in me. God, pour out in me the joy and the peace that you offer that I could not trust in money or its tangible gifts of comfort or security. God, that I would not look to those for my source, but I would look to you as my source. So God, help me give in accordance, to give sacrificially in order that I may prove to myself, that I might reveal to myself that my faith in you is matched by my willingness to give generously. God, I pray for our church. God, move in us. Continue to work in us, that we might be a church that portrays to the world that communicates to the world, that reveals to our city a Jesus worth following, a Jesus who loves and calls and draws people close and loves with a love that is more lavish than anything this world provides. And God, in that you offer us peace and hope. May we be a presentation of that. May our willingness to sacrifice, our willingness to be obedient, to be used by you, would that help others see, know, and follow you, Jesus? We love you. We trust you. We believe that you have a good plan in store. It's in our pray. Amen. Hey, thanks for being here this morning. If you need someone to pray for you, just stay seated. As we take our conversation to the lobby, our prayer team will come and find you. Thank you, guys.